I've got 3 o'clock, and it looks like we have a quorum here. I'm Brad Dial, Chairman of the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District, and I will call this meeting to order at this time. Could we please have a roll call?
Farron.
Present.
Hannon.
Here.
Uchtman.
Present.
Bauer.
Here.
Chaplin.
Here.
Cho. Dial.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Our first item is our approval of our agenda, which you should have in front of you. If you'll review that quickly, and I'll ask for a motion and a second on that.
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved and seconded for approval of our agenda as presented. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Audience participation is our next item. If anyone in the audience would like to speak, please approach the podium, state your name and address. This is an opportunity to make a statement to the Board of Trustees as a whole. We do not answer questions during this period. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. The countdown clock will display your remaining time. Anyone have any comment for the board at this time? Seeing none, moving on to our next item will be approval of our minutes from the July 26, 2017 board meeting. I ask for a motion and a second after you've reviewed those.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comment on those? I will be abstaining from voting on this as myself and Don were not here. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries with 2 abstentions. Any communications, Carl?
None.
We have no communications. We'll ask for our report from the managing director.
Thank you. The August report is for data summarized for the month of July. Ridership was 387,398, and that is 8.83% below July of 2016, which was 424,915. The operating revenue for the month was, 493,748, which is 4% above July of 2016. And the operating expenses were $2,775,054, which is 0.4% below July of 2016. The year-to-date operating revenues are $5,331 above budget, and the operating expenses are $653,095 under budget. And with that, I will take any questions that you might have between pages 4 and 40 of the report.
Questions for Carl? Jim?
Carl, just on your last point, what would account for the fiscal year 2017 operating expenses being over $500,000 different from budget? How does that explain?
Primarily, that's a result of fuel costs. And we budget enough money in the budget to buffer or accommodate increase in cost in fuel. And so the fuel prices have been relatively flat, although they have been creeping up a little bit over the last several months, but they've been relatively flat. And so that makes up for the majority of that.
So it's fuel costs in large measure?
In large measure, yes.
Yes. I had a few other, I didn't know if I didn't want to dominate. I had a couple other just points. I thought it was interesting, your token transit aspect. It sounded like an interesting program, but you track people. I wondered where that interfaces with the privacy issue.
Great question. And so we're really excited about this too. On 2 fronts. One, their main product is this concept of mobile ticketing. I think will be something that the community adopts and is also excited about. It will give them a lot more freedom and flexibility for fare utilization. And so I think just in that on that side, it's really exciting. Specifically regarding the tracking, we don't actually track an individual, so we get no personal information. Now, the vendor would be able to, they have information because they know who their customers are, but the information that they provide to us is scrubbed of all personal information. So all they'll say is a person got on at this location, stayed on the bus, and then got off on this at this location. And so all we will have is that basic of information. And so it just literally only gives us origin and destination for an individual, but it's an unidentified individual. We don't know anything about them: race, sex, creed, color, religion, nothing. It just is an individual, origin, destination. That's it.
Like a dot on the map, if you will.
I don't think it'll be on a map, literally, but it's, yeah, it's just a table of origin, destination, origin, destination. And so that will, we've been working towards this for a while now, and this is a solution that's been offered to us that we're excited about, because some of the other solutions that we were pursuing ended up being dead ends, and relatively frustrating to try to get some traction for that. So this was a product that Token Transit had already developed, but they haven't actually implemented anywhere. So we'll be the first customer that they have that implements this module of theirs. And so it's good for both of us. We get it at a discounted, reduced rate because we're the guinea pigs,
If you will.
and
But
they
sort of
get
like
guinea
a pilot
pigs.
test, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Does this mean that you don't need Woodley anymore?
Well, this, yeah, so that was one of the avenues that I mentioned that turned out to be a dead end. We had been working with a computer science class with the University of Illinois to develop a method of doing this very thing, and that didn't pan out. It didn't work out the way that we were hoping that it would. And so in this specific regard, I think that's probably not something that we'll need a class to do, although I'm not ready to disconnect completely from that professor, because the Token Transit utilization is specific to their customer base only. And so I do think that there might be some potential to do a Plan B or an alternative method to get a larger collection of data that would be beyond just their customer base. For instance, U of I students, faculty, and staff are not going to be, that data is not likely to be collected by Token Transit, because they're not going to be using mobile tickets, because they can just show their ID and get on. I'd like to be able to get those ridership groups also, and so there may be a way that a CS class could help us with that, but those are conversations that are still pending.
There's still the issue of they get off at a certain place, but it may be that it's just the closest place, and it's still quite a ways from where they are ultimately going, or it's right on the spot where they needed to go. We don't know what that is. We don't know what happens once they get off.
That's certainly
But
true.
they come to get on.
Right, and the only way for us to have that kind of information would be to survey them and to speak with them and to person derive that information. And that is extremely labor intensive to do that, which is one thing that we're trying to avoid, to try to get a larger body of data without having the labor intensive side to it.
Don?
Not in your report per se, but we've got the start of school. We still have a lot of construction underway. We have some new routes. We have the designated stops. I'm just wondering how all of that is going and whether we're managing to pretty much run on time in spite of some of these challenges, or if we're having some really special difficulties.
I would say the latter. There certainly are special difficulties this year that are more prominent than we've experienced in the past. Although I was speaking with our student representative, Jacob Reilich, before the meeting started, and he was indicating that he felt like the services were operating certainly more smoothly than what he had been anticipating they would. Would that be a fair representation? So that's good, that's positive, but at the same time, he did indicate that they are, buses are behind schedule. You know, we're stuck in the same traffic, we operate in the same environment as everybody else, and so those are challenges, but we're doing the best that we can, and we're getting backup buses in when we can, and getting them plugged in to get service back on schedule. So, you know, we're trying to respond to those special challenges, but they certainly exist.
Well, good luck. I'm sure we're doing the best we possibly can.
We're giving it our best.
Quick question.
Bruce, go ahead.
Ridership is down. Do expenses go down in any way proportional to that?
No, not really, because the expenses are a
Driven by
result
service.
of the service on the street. And so, like we've talked before, the cost of operating a bus is generally 75% of that cost is the person in the seat, and then 25% of it are the incidentals to that person. And so that doesn't change whether or not there are 75 people on the bus versus 7 people on the bus. It still costs the same to have that driver in the seat.
What I was wondering, if you made the route adjustments in any way due to declining ridership?
No, absolutely not. This is trying to make a change to respond to a decline in the ridership at this point would introduce unintended consequences that we can't even identify at this point. We have such a fluid environment right now with the MCOR construction and other variables that it would be impossible for us to make changes that would be reasonable or predictable in terms of their results. And so we very much want to avoid doing that at this time.
Additional questions for Carl up to page 40.
Carl?
Brian, I'm going to let Brian go first.
Just to follow up on token transit, I assume that that's just a replacement for cash fares, correct? I mean, there wouldn't be a discussion of making annual passes or anything else through the token transit app?
It's not a one-for-one replacement, but I guess I'd say it will run parallel to cash and passes, and so an individual can, so on their smartphone, they can buy an annual pass on their phone rather than buying a pass at Illinois Terminal and having an actual card that they show the driver. They can have their mobile ticket, which is an annual pass that they show the driver.
Okay.
And so it does replace annual pass, monthly passes, or they'll be able to do, for instance, an all-day pass, which would replace cash and that kind of thing. And we could potentially, these don't exist now, but we could potentially have a weekly pass or a weekend pass or something like that. And so we have a lot more opportunity to make flexible choices in providing fare options for the customer with that app. So it doesn't just, we're not just going to do away with cash fares, but as time progresses and if people move over to this and they stop using cash, I could foresee a time where maybe we do that, which would be a savings in our costs. It's not inexpensive to handle cash, and so that would be a benefit of it. Same with producing the annual pass and the monthly pass. As that utilization goes down and people move to a mobile ticketing, then potentially we could do away with those, and that would be a cost savings. But those two things, I think, would be much further down the road than anything in the
Sure.
immediate future.
I guess the other part of that, Carl, I was wondering if there were, is it just a visual inspection that's done on the mobile app? There's not a
Correct.
verification
There's no
reader?
device that reads anything. It purely is a, like you said, a visual inspection. So there's still something that the passenger, it's the phone, but they still have to show that to the operator, and it is formatted in such a way, it's a motion type of pass to prevent fraud, and that changes daily, and so the operators know what is valid and what is not valid, and
You anticipated my other question. Thanks.
Jim?
More, under major efforts, I had a couple final questions. You used the term, and I've always wondered what it meant or its variable. It says here, Illinois terminal expansion, bottom of page 6. As mentioned above, the project will move directly into due diligence phase. What does that mean, and is it variable based on the project?
certainly, it certainly is variable depending on the context. In this context, it means that we've entered into a phase where we are doing the proper amount of study and analysis before the various partners are locked in to doing the project, either via, primarily via agreements with one another. So we want to, we're going to start working on draft agreements, but before we actually bring those agreements to the various bodies for approval and we sign on the dotted line, we want to be able to answer certain questions. So we want to have completed the traffic analysis and the parking study and things like that, economic impact analysis, and be able to answer the questions that those studies are designed to answer prior to marrying one another, City of Champaign, MTD, and the developer. And so that's what the due diligence is. It's doing the proper study and analysis prior to going beyond the point of no return.
So due diligence, to some extent, would be subjective based on the situation?
Certainly. Yeah, and so what I just
So
described.
essentially, you're determining what due diligence is based on the project.
Right, so what I just described to you is subjectively what the city, the developer, and MTD staff have thought through as the appropriate due diligence.
I had one final thought, and then I'm done for right now.
Okay.
Route analysis, we continue to wait, this top of page 7, we continue to wait for the grant contract from IDOT. Do we not potentially have the capability of route analysis within the organizational skills of MTD staff?
Well, we do, but the idea behind this, and this has been a similar answer to a couple of your questions from this past week. This predates your time on the board, but there was a desire from the board at the time to have a third party, an outside party, come in and do an analysis that did not involve the internal staff to determine the veracity of what the staff has been analyzing. Which is fine. That's healthy to do on occasion, to have somebody else come in, another set of eyeballs come in and look at something and see if you're missing something or if you're interpreting data properly and that kind of thing. And so that's what this was designed to do. It has taken way more time to actually pull the trigger on this than it ever should have, and it 100% is because we have been waiting for the contract agreement from IDOT. We've been told that we've been awarded the grant, but we have not gotten the contract executed yet. And so we continue to wait on that, and it is one of those very, very frustrating things that we occasionally encounter when we're dealing with that agency.
Yeah, again, predating, I did not have this prior knowledge, but it would seem almost that in certain situations, not necessarily only this one, or other things that you almost should put a timeline. If you do not get some kind of resolution on it, you need to move on. I mean, you could be in a, if you will, straddling the fence forever.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way sometimes.
That might be something the board may consider in the future.
Any other questions for Carl up to page 40 from the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to our board committees. Administration has a report. Bruce?
Yes, on the ethics and local government. Turn it over to Fred. We have this meeting passed out.
Can we put you on a 5-minute clock, Bruce? Fred?
Wow, I usually remind people of that. Yeah, I usually remind people of that, and I also am in the position with the city that I remind people about ethics usually. That's one of my roles with the city. And in conjunction with that role, you know, we used to do training regularly. Many entities did training prior to the recession in ethics. We had a kind of a robust ethics curriculum, but curtailed that substantially after we were looking for things to cut. We cut a lot of training out. Now we're coming back to that a little bit. So encouraged by Carl and our city manager, I started work on an ethics presentation. You're the pilot for this, so I hope you'll bear with me. I want to acknowledge that this material is not unique to me. I talk regularly with other people in the ethics area. Some of this material is from the Texas Center in Ethics based in Austin. They have a very, very nice program for government officials down there, and also several law firms in Illinois that put on occasional presentations. So I'll acknowledge that to begin with. That would be the ethical thing to do. And I also want to point out that these are very basic concepts. So the proposition is that we're going to come back and talk, hopefully, if the board's amenable to this, about some very specific areas in the world of ethics later. All I have to do is master this and make this move along here, but I'm trying to get this, okay. I'm trying to get this to move easier, okay. So, you know, the basic concept of ethics is based on values of an organization. And it helps get to a point where you're making the right choice. You might think of it as moral standards, something to do right versus wrong. It's driven by what I was just at an ethics presentation, and he said, you know, my basic moral standard is based on something called Betty's rule. Somebody said, "Who's Betty?" He said, "That's my mother." And the rule is, thou shalt not embarrass your mother in public. Kind of the basic ethics rule. I think everybody would ascribe to that. You know, the notion that you need to get to the right action is what the ethical path is based on. And it's centered on a number of different concepts. Basic, your values, what values you hold, what values the community or organization holds. Value might be openness, honesty, speaking in a straightforward way. But these values only come about because people talk about them. It's a little bit like being in a marriage or any relationship. Things get valued because you speak about them openly and as a group in this situation. Ethical practices are habits that people get into as they function in the operations of, for instance, this organization. But as part of that, we, the board, the state legislature, they develop rules of conduct, rules and regulations. That all goes into an ethical framework. None of them stand alone at all. So the real question that I always hear is, well, you know, it's legal, so it must be ethical, right? Or it's ethical, it must be legal, right? They're not necessarily coincident concepts. But it's a commonly asked question. So there are ethics laws. There's plenty of ethics laws in Illinois. Laws that touch on the values of organizations, government organizations. But these are minimum standards. These are minimum standards for required conduct, and they carry penalties. That's a law. But the notion of ethics is more hinged on what you ought to do. In other words, what's beyond the law. So, as I said, Illinois has a pretty complex series of ethical dictates. We'll get to that at the very end. But again, it's the minimum requirements. We want to get beyond that. So what are some of the other sources of ethical mandates, or what the rules of conduct? Well, you know, there's the old golden rule. There are religious beliefs. There are organizational codes. A good example of an organizational ethic is safety. Everybody could say a certain ethic of the organization, the MTD, is to promote safety. Safety is everyone's responsibility. You probably heard that 100 times, and it's probably repeated over and over at the MTD. It's probably discussed. I bet there's a safety committee that exists. Well, the world of ethics can borrow from that notion, that safety notion. You want to say ethics is everyone's responsibility as well. It's a lot like promoting a culture of safety. It's incumbent on the board and management to promote a culture of ethical behavior too. So one of the other places that this is, you might find a source of ethical mandates. You know, everybody's familiar with the Code of Conduct at West Point. You know, a cadet will not lie, cheat, steal, or tolerate others who do. It's an ethic in the organization, simply stated, as most good rules are. So you might find it there. You might find it if you went to your local Rotary Club. That's sort of one of my favorites. The local Rotary Club has a 4-way test for behavior. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better relationships, friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? It's a pretty straightforward ethical test for your actions. So you can see ethics come from a variety of different sources that we can draw on in talking about it. The notion of ethics is tied very intimately with the concept of integrity. But integrity is an action. It's an action. It's a choice. To act with integrity means that you're choosing to go in a particular direction now, hopefully one that's guided by these principles. there's a personal integrity that a person has, and that's accountability for your actions, conducting personal relationships or business relationships fairly and honestly. Everybody recognizes someone who acts like integrity in an organization. But then again, there is this larger concept of organizational integrity. In other words, what's happening in the organization? What's the organizational culture? What are the management practices? What are the training? How do we hold people accountable? How do we reward people for acting with integrity? So these are sort of big picture concepts, the concept of ethical conduct and integrity. So why should the board talk about integrity? Why should you talk about it now? There's nothing going on. Isn't that nice? There's nothing going on, and nobody's come up and said, oh, you know, the board's not acting with honest motives. The board's doing things behind closed doors. Nobody's saying that now. Not now. But I just pulled something off of, just off the front page of a paper. You could look at it almost any day, any paper. Elected official violated by blocking a person from Facebook. Violated the First Amendment by blocking someone. So some of these those issues, like following the Constitution, you would think would be for a government entity would be an ethical behavior you'd want to promote. But here we're faced with a pretty modern, very recent example of someone who is accused of unethical conduct, violating the Constitution, from blocking a person on their Facebook page, their personal Facebook page. Now, of course, there's more to that story. You know, the elected official held out the page as sort of his public persona, made official pronouncements from there. You probably heard about government officials making official pronouncements from social media. But these cases are starting to wind their way through the court. There's no solid law on there. But these are all matters of ethical behavior in the public sector. So social media is in the world, in the legal world, and the world of ethics is a constant stream of communication now. And even though the cases aren't sorted out, you can see the direction that they're going. That consideration of what happens on social media is an intimate part of how an organization has to consider in considering a culture that's value-based and ethical in nature. So the bottom line is it's good governance to talk about ethics because I think the MTD has been a leader in so many areas in the community. This is another place where the MTD can lead. And one of the ways to do this is to model ethical behavior. You know, you can portray ethics as a negative always, you know, accusatory, not promoting the positive, but really promoting it as a positive element is something that builds public trust, and a way to do it is to discuss issues when they come up, but to promote that discussion. So it's not something you do, it's something you do just when people are looking. It's something that you want to inculcate in your culture all the time. So there's a lot of positives from ethical conduct. Being a leader in this area and being known for an ethical organization is certainly a positive. What does ethical leadership look like? Well, it promotes things in the community. It promotes people feeling like they've been justly treated. It talks about how you respect other people. It builds community. And certainly if one thing I've noticed in the MTD, it's the fact that it's about building community. So it's sort of a natural line for the MTD to talk about that. There are some key elements of government leadership in the ethical area, about avoiding personal gain, avoiding personal advantage, promoting fairness and impartiality. These are elements of government leadership and leadership in your organization. There is good leadership is, has other good elements to this, ethical leadership, that's satisfying personally. I think people will acknowledge that when you've done something right for the right reason, you feel personally satisfied. So just for the personal efficaciousness of the board members, it's something to be proud of. But it's also something for your organization to cling to and be proud of as well, to hold out to the community. So there's some everyday challenges for managers in particular in promoting this. I've listed some here. You can see some of the ones that I wanted to indicate that are really part of what you'd think of as ethical leadership is telling the truth. It might seem like that's a natural part of how a governmental organization should operate, but talking about it and modeling that behavior, not just for the community, or not just for the organization, but for the community, well, that's got to be a positive. Rewarding employees who behave ethically, encouraging that discussion is another part of promoting an ethical culture in the organization. Protecting employees, whistleblowers who bring unethical behaviors to the fore is another way of promoting that activity. In fact, now both the city and the MTD have a place to report unethical behavior on your websites, on our website in the city and on the MTD website. It's to encourage that. So my course of action, or my suggested course of action for the board, is for us to present more information to you, and I'll talk about what type of information in the next several meetings, over the course of the next several meetings, and also as part of that information to discuss the impact of technology on these. So there are a lot of rules we have in Illinois, and so I've listed them on a couple pages here. Conflict of interest. Everybody always talks about conflict of interest, sort of in very general terms, but we'd like to talk to the board about what we mean by a statutory conflict of interest. There's also something called a common law conflict of interest, which we touch on there too. There's the Gift Ban Act, which is relatively recent. This is not conflict of interest law goes back to the creation of the state of Illinois. There's always been conflict of interest rules. The gift ban and this prohibited political activity laws were passed 7 or 8 years ago. These are relatively new on the, at least the local government scene. Official misconduct and other crimes involving purchasing. There are some purchasing issues and crimes related to purchasing that are little known and very seldom discussed by governing bodies, not necessarily to their advantage. You find people getting caught up in these with some regularity. All you have to do is look through the papers for a little bit to realize how people can get caught either inadvertently or, I guess the opposite of that would be advertently. But it's easy to know what the rules are, but you have to talk about it. If you don't talk about it, you don't know. I wager that no one, I suggest, or I don't want to say no one, but when you're introduced to service with the board, it's not usual, and it's not usual for most bodies to go over a long series of these rules and laws. You sort of pick it up as you go along. But this is an opportunity to learn a little bit more about these laws that could impact you very dramatically. But there are more that are within the realm of ethical discussion. There's the financial disclosure laws. You all fill out that, you used to fill out the yellow sheet. Now it's online, so you can do it that way. important to know about and understand, we'd be available to discuss that a bit. The Open Meetings Act, the Freedom of Information Act, human rights is an ethical issue. It's important to make sure that that's part of the concept of ethics that you deal with. And there may be other topics that you're interested in that I haven't listed here. But these are some of the items that we can discuss, that the board can have discussion, listen to information about, and then have discussion about. But the question is A, are you interested in that? It's going to take some of your time. And B, how do you want us to present this information? We can give you a sheath of material to read. That's one way to do it. The other way is to listen to short presentations over the next course of time. They can be done in maybe 2 meetings, 3 meetings, 4 meetings. Depends how long you want to take out of your meeting time to do that, or not at all. You don't have to do any more than right now. You've had some basic introduction, but I guess I'd ask for some board direction on what your preference would be. And Carl, I want to again. I guess want to express sort of thanks to Carl for his leadership and just bringing this to the board. It's not usual for government bodies to talk about ethics in public, and he's to be commended, and so are you.
In Fred's and my early conversations, Fred had proposed that the legal department do role-playing skits and they act out ethical scenarios for you, and I said no, we're not going to do that. So that was me showing leadership there.
That was good leadership. Linda?
Isn't there another option, like a study session or committee of the whole? I think, for me personally, it might be better to separate it out from the busyness of the day and the agenda and focus on ethical issues, especially if you have time to look at more than one, so you can kind of see how things overlap or integrate.
And I was wondering, Fred, were you thinking about doing something maybe quarterly, or did you have any sort of vision?
It's really sort of a board decision how you want to absorb some information about this. You know, you could take a whole day to do this, but we didn't think that the whole day was feasible. So we had thought to parcel this off a little bit at a time at successive meetings. You could spend a study session doing it over 3 or 4 hours, but like I said, there's a pretty good body of material here to cover, and so it really this is sort of a new thing to think about, and maybe even you want to give yourself a meeting to think about it and not decide immediately. But, you know, that's the other. You can give us some direction at the next meeting. This material is not going to go away. We're not going to do anything but be responsive to your needs.
Bruce?
The university does this all the time, and they present it as a kind of a web sequence of events. And they use scenarios to test. They explain the scenario. They've already explained the ethical pitfalls around such a scenario, and then they give you a little test all online to see if you can do that. See if you can correlate the advice with the situation. They do that over and over again. It strikes me that that's a pretty efficient way to do it, if we could each.
Yeah, it's. I'll respond to that a little bit. Yeah, it's efficient, and no doubt you can find material online. You can find stuff from the state's attorney's office, but one thing I think is that it's not a group. You're not in public. You can do it in the privacy of your home, certainly, But discussing ethics in public, I think, is the important part of this. But not exclusively. There's much more efficient ways to do that. Yeah, I agree with that.
Margaret?
I guess I would think that doing it sort of in little chunks over time would enable us to sort of tailor the parts of the topic to the circumstances of the MTD, whereas the universities is probably more generic. It's been a long time since I worked for them, so I don't remember that website. But I thought one of the advantages would be if we're doing this ourselves, then we can look, if we're going to do case studies or we're going to look at specific portions of the law, we can look at those parts that apply to the activities of the MTD and the board.
And I would say, relative to spreading it out, we would look at agendas that are relatively light, that those would be the meetings that we would plug in one of the modules that Fred's talking about. We wouldn't, there's not a strict deadline that this has to be completed by, so we're not going to have one of these on every agenda for the next 5 months, come hell or high water. You know, if the agenda is packed and it's full, then okay, that's a month that we don't need to do this. We can set it aside and wait until there's a lighter agenda so that it's more consumable for you and you have some time to spend on it without it getting mixed in with the busyness of the rest of the agenda.
And, you know, we obviously, Fred, these topics here, he has, 8 topics plus number 9 additional other topics. Obviously, there's lots of stuff to cover, and maybe we could, cover one of these items and then have some sort of a follow-up with some sort of a web-based thing where people could kind of, go through that on their own schedule and see if they're really understanding the concepts that Fred's discussed. So, at this time, does the board have any direction, or do we want to take a little time to think about it? Jim, go ahead.
My input would be, I have difficulty thinking this should be part of a board meeting. But I liked your initial thought, Linda, some kind of maybe podcasts where we would have the opportunity to listen to it or however it's presented, and then set aside time as a study group perhaps based on a person's interest rather than consuming board time with something like this. And that opens up a whole different, where do you stop inputs into the board? That's how I would see it. And testing, I don't see how you test ethics. So I think you discuss it, not test it. But
We hadn't thought about testing.
yeah.
I thought about testing.
Any other input from the board on this item or direction?
Well, I think that Carl will provide some direction as to the meetings and hearing your concerns about having some separation from the meeting, make it a little easier to digest, I hear, maybe in several different formats. We'll work on that maybe with Carl and come back to you with some proposal.
Super. Thank you, Fred.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. Any other items from Administration Committee? Bruce? All right. Facilities, Matt?
Couple updates. The 1207 CDL, I think, is about 3 weeks out, according to Carl. And 803, I think they're going through final punch list, so that should be ready to go. And then I think Carl has updated us on the Urbana and Champaign transit terminals. Urbana, possibly an architect will be hired to do a rendering, and Champaign, we heard from Hans last month.
Carl, will we be doing any kind of grand opening or anything for 1203 and 1207, 803, or will be anything else going on with that?
We'll be using it before we do any kind of grand opening, but we certainly will have some form of that and an open house type of scenario, but I don't have any details yet for that.
Okay, thank you.
Are we going to hear from Carl regarding page 6? The Hans Grolution meeting with the city council? Anything else on that?
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of what you said.
Page 6, Hans Grolution and the meeting with the city council explaining the thing. Are we talking about that, or are we going to just read it? Or did you already?
I didn't in the meeting. We can talk about it.
Seems like everything went quite well, as I recall.
With the city council meeting
Yeah.
itself, yeah, yes. So the update here is that city staff, the planning department, and Hans Grotolution and myself, we met with the city council on the 22nd and had a conversation about this entering this due diligence phase of the Illinois Terminal Expansion Project. And the council unanimously gave concurrence to move ahead into that. And so we will begin negotiating with the consultants to do those studies. And we'll get those underway as quickly as we can with a target to have those completed before the end of the calendar year.
This is sort of a facilities question. Do we ever get a demolition contract for the buildings over here where we?
We did.
I'm
yeah.
a little out of the loop since I was gone for a while.
No,
so-
that's not a silly question, because that was quite the
Yes.
maze of events to get there. But we did get a contract, and it actually is with the contractor who was at that very first
Iron Horse.
board. Iron Horse, yes. Yes.
Okay.
And I
All right.
think they're beginning the week after Labor Day, so sometime next week.
All right, if there's nothing else for Facilities Committee, then we'll move to Service Delivery.
No report.
No report from Service Delivery. We'll start with our action items. Action item A is annexation resolution setting time, date, and location for public hearings. Our first resolution, let me flip to it here. It's 2017-7. That will be a resolution setting a public hearing and direction giving notice thereof that the Board of Trustees will be holding a public hearing on the 12th day of October 2017 at 4 o'clock in the activity room at the Savoy Recreation Center, 402 Graham Drive, or in Savoy, and that is for properties in the Prairie Meadows subdivision. I'll ask for a motion and a second to begin discussion on this resolution.
I move we approve the resolution.
Any questions from the board on this resolution? Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote on this. All in favor of Resolution 2017-7, say aye. Aye. All disagreeing with that resolution? Hearing none, motion carries. Our second action item deals with Resolution 2017-8, which is another public hearing for the South Ridge subdivision in Urbana. That public hearing will be held the 16th day of October 2017 at 4 o'clock, St. Matthew's Lutheran Church, 2002 Filer Road in Urbana. I'd ask for a motion to approve this resolution 2017-8.
So move.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Oop. Discussion. Margaret.
It's just a clarification. What is this street that runs through here? There's no street names on here, this one. It would be this one. Is that Windsor? Is that,
That's Windsor.
okay.
Yeah, so where there's the large yellow box, that's university property, and that, on the north edge of that is Windsor Avenue, or Windsor Road
Yeah. Okay, and the vertical one here?
is Philo Road.
Philo, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board on this particular item?
You know what, I'm sorry, I'm disoriented. That is not the university property on, that is Philo, that is not Windsor. That is South Ridge Road or something like that, the east-west one. That Windsor is further up north. This is all the Myra Ridge and South Ridge development up, that's already in the district in the blue. So that's not Windsor. It doesn't go, that road doesn't go west of Philo. It only goes east into the South Ridge, and I think it's called South Ridge Road or something like that. No, Myra Ridge is north-south. You can see that over further right on the map. And I'm sorry, I'd have to look that up on Google Maps.
I actually, are you talking about this line right here?
That's the line I was interested in, but I don't know whether that's the line that Carl, this is Philo. But it,
I don't think that's actually a street. I think that's a Park District sidewalk, I believe. That's what it looks like on Google Maps. Looks like it's a sidewalk that runs down through there. Looks like Mark Trail is the actual street that serves that area. Mark Trail right here.
Yeah,
That's actually not a street.
I think you're right, Brad.
That's a
That's why we
sidewalk.
couldn't name it.
Yeah. It's what it appears to be anyway. It's,
but this, it just seems odd to me that Philo should run through the middle, but it doesn't. I mean, it picks up and lets off.
No, this,
It
Philo
doesn't.
Road is the main north-south road.
Not this one.
That's not a road.
Oh, it's not? That white line is not a road.
that's the edge of a field or something. That's what that line is, yeah.
Okay, I think I'm. Yeah, okay.
It's in a field. All right. Additional questions on this item, which is Resolution 2017-8 from the board. Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote on this. All those in favor, say aye.
Brad, I needed to do a roll call. I'm sorry.
Sorry, well, we need to back up and do a roll call
Do.
on the other one. Sorry,
I goofed
okay.
up.
Whoops.
You could do that.
We need to do them independently.
Okay.
So let's go back to 2017-7. She would like to have a roll call on that.
Barron.
Yes.
Hannan. Uchtman.
Yes.
Bauer.
Yes.
Chaplin.
Yes.
Cho. Dial.
Yes, motion carries. 2017-8. We're back on the Southridge subdivision. Roll call.
Barron. Hannan. Uchtman.
Yes.
Bauer.
Yes.
Chaplin.
Yes.
Cho. Dial.
Motion carries, yes. Resolution 2017-9, that will be Will's Trace. That's the few lots in that original West Champaign area that we didn't get done in our first set of public hearings. I'll ask first for a motion to approve this resolution 2017-9.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion or participation? Carl?
Yeah, just real quick, I do have Tom Burns and one of his associates, Kevin, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your last name, but from Burns Clancy here to answer any questions, should you have any. But essentially, this was an area that was intended to be included in the Southwest Champaign annexation that we did in June. But there was a technical hiccup in the legal definition of the greater annexed area, and this subdivision, this Wills Trace Phase 4 subdivision, inadvertently got left out. And so we're revisiting this simply because of that. It was intended to be included in the original, and it was a technical error. So if you have any questions for Tom and Kevin, they'd be happy to come up to the table and answer them.
Anything from the board?
Again, I'd like some street names. I'm trying to picture where this, this far left one? This is Rising Road. This is Rising Road? Okay. Kirby is down here. Oh, it's north of Kirby, okay. North of Kirby, okay, thank you.
Is that right?
I don't have one.
Any other questions from the board or questions for our guests? Thank you both for coming today. I appreciate it. I'll ask for a vote on Resolution 2017-9, and that will be setting a public hearing for the 3rd day of October at 4 o'clock at Fire Station 6 in the meeting room, 3911 West Windsor Road in Champaign. All in favor, roll call.
Farren.
Yes.
Hannan. Uchtman.
Yes.
Bauer.
Yes.
Chaplin. Cho. Dial.
Yes, motion carries. That is our last action item on our agenda. Our next meeting is set for Wednesday, September 27th, 3 o'clock, right here in the Champaign City Council chambers. Appreciate your attendance today. I'll ask for a motion for adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
It's been moved and seconded. Thanks for coming today.